YouTube channel. My name is Zee, short for Zetembiso, and welcome if you're new here. If you are returning and you are a subscriber, shout out to you. I appreciate you. Please note that today's video is not for children. All my videos are not for children, but I just want to emphasize that this video is not for anyone under 18. This video is not for anyone who's a sensitive viewer. I describe things in quite graphic detail in this video, and this video is definitely triggering, especially for anyone who's been through such an experience. Please just give this one a skip. The topic that we are covering for the next two videos is gender-based violence, or it's also known as intimate partner violence, and I'll be sharing stories about when I witnessed these close to me. And so the first video was pre-recorded some time ago, and I'm going to insert that, and then next week we'll be looking at the rest of the video where I'll be telling a different story and just maybe explaining a bit more about why it is that I chose to speak about this topic in particular. So let's get into the story. Today I'm going to be telling you a story about how I witnessed gender-based violence, to be more specific, domestic violence, for the first time in my life. So I was actually 18 at the time. I remember it was the end of my first year, and up until that point I had heard about domestic violence. I think most of what I had heard was coming from TV. I didn't know an actual person or anyone close to me who had experienced this, so it wasn't a new concept. However, I hadn't actually seen it in real life. And to get to that age and not have actually experienced it or seen it, I think is a pretty good upbringing. So I do realize what a privilege that is. So anyways, I'm 18 and I traveled to Mpumalanga to go spend the holidays with a friend of mine. Well, my then friend. And if I were to describe this friend to you, it's just, there's so many inconsistencies between the person I knew and the person that I was then going to visit, because I think we had been apart for perhaps about 2 years at the time. So in those 2 years she had changed quite drastically. So anyway, I won't even go into her and the entire trip. If I were to go into the entire trip, it would be a 4-hour long story, because it's a very, very long story. A lot of things happened in that 2 weeks, so I'm just going to focus on that one incident, that sort of one day, that I would, witness gender-based violence right in front of me. So even though this was quite some time ago, I will be changing the identities of the people in order to protect them. I actually, in all honesty, cannot even really remember their real names, so I'll just refer to the guy as Mogai and the girl as Girly, or not more girl but girly. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So that's what I will refer to them as, just to, I hope I can be able to tell the story without getting lost, because I do think I remember the girl's name. I'm not sure, but anyways, that's what we'll do. So I will try my level best to tell the story in English, as much as most of my videos are in English. When I get into story mode, or when I get into, there's a place where you get into, you can't help but speak in your own language. Actually, a funny thing is that what used to happen, sometimes in meetings, because I'd get so passionate, or I don't know, like something would overcome me and I'd speak in my own language. And my colleague would say to me, "You do realize that like, meaning, why are you not speaking in English?" And I'd be like, just translate for them. So there is a place where I can no longer speak in English. So hopefully, I'll add subtitles, I guess, if I stray into my own language. So, where do I begin? This incident took place while I was away from home, so I was not anywhere near any adult supervision, to be honest. So my friend's mom was a nurse, and it was the festive season, and she was working night shift, so she would only be in the house during the day, and she would be sleeping the entire time. So there was hardly any supervision. So I'm actually, like I said, not even going to go into the details of that entire period that I was there to visit. A lot happened, but I just wanted to give an explanation of why it was that there was no adult supervision or adult people around when this incident took place. So what actually happened was that it was in the evening. It was an evening, and I'm a little nervous telling the story because I know my mom watches these videos and she doesn't know the story. So what took place on that evening was what was normally happening, which was there was just a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, a lot of very reckless behavior. I don't know whether to actually say that I didn't partake in it, as much as I was more of a, not so much of a participant, but just more of an observer. But I mean, this was happening and I didn't say anything to anyone about it. I just sort of pretended to be cool about it, because I don't want to be the person who, tells on them to say, hey, this is what happens when you're at work. And, I don't want to call my parents and say, hi guys, because I know my parents would probably come and pick me up. So I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't alert anyone about what was happening, but a lot of things that were happening should probably not have been happening. But like I said, I was young, I was impressionable, and I really wanted these people to think I was cool, So as mentioned, this was one of the evenings. We were just sitting. I was sitting outside. I remember sitting outside with some guy, and this guy was like a big guy. You'll understand later. So on this particular night, there were some people around, but there was not that many people around. And I think where my friend was outside their yard. There were some people with their cars, and they were listening to music from there, because one of the drunken nights somebody knocked off the music system in the house, so there was actually no music in the house. So I was sitting with one other guy, and in the house was Mugai and Mugirl. So I think at some point we were all sitting together, and I don't know how it happened that they ended up in the house somehow. But anyways, like, anybody could go into the house. There was no, like I said, there was no supervision. There was no order. Like, anybody could do whatever they wanted to do, however they wanted to do it. So I think somehow they managed to go into the house without us sort of realizing that they were in the house, and we were just sitting outside talking. So Mugai, just to give you a bit of backstory about Mugai. Mugai is one of those guys, because this is I wouldn't say rural area, but yeah, it's not township, but it's not also so rural, yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but let's say it's a semi-rural place. But anyways, a small place, and a lot of people know each other in that area. And he was known to be very, very aggressive. Like, you don't mess with him. He's that guy. You don't mess with him. Nobody robs him. People who tell you stories about no one will rob me and blah blah blah. He's that guy, and had a lot of anger issues. One thing that I find interesting about black communities is that we don't talk about people that we know clearly have issues, because in getting to know him, what I had gathered was that this guy was actually an outside child. So he was the child of the mistress in the family setup. I hope you're following. So he had a lot of anger because the children who were his dad's children from his marriage were obviously being treated much better than he was. So he had a lot of anger issues. He spoke about these people, and some of them he had a good relationship with. In fact, the guy I was sitting with is actually one of his half brothers. So, so he's the one he was sort of cool with. But the others, he sort of had animosity against them. So that's just who he was. Didn't have such a great upbringing. Also brought up mainly by his grandmother. And Girly also stayed with her grandmother. I don't know where Girly's parents were. So she also was from a family structure that was a bit, I don't know how to describe it, but she was sort of like the breadwinner, if I can put it that way. So she relied on Mugai for financial assistance, So Mugai did have some kind of a job, and so basically he was sort of supporting Girly and her grandmother. So I give this context so that you can understand that these situations are not just that straightforward. And I only understand it now, though, because at the time it didn't make sense to me what then happened. So we sitting outside, and Mugai comes to the door, right? So we sitting right by the door because it is dark. So because it's not a township, there's no street lighting or anything, so outside it's pretty dark. So we're sitting closer to the door where there's at least light coming from the house. So he comes to the door frame, and I'll never forget this. He comes to the door frame, and I think we say, "Oh, Mugai, where have you been?" And he's like, "No, it's just chilling," like, I don't know, he gives some sort of answer. And we continue with our conversation, and it's just something that it still puzzles me till this day, because for a good 20 minutes he talks about whatever it is that we're talking about. So he gets involved in our conversation, but somehow I think he waited for an opportunity in the conversation that we were having to basically bring attention to himself. So it was quite hot in December. It's quite hot. And this place was really, really hot. So when he came out, he didn't have a shirt on, but it was sort of normal because it's hot. So while we're having this conversation, he's like, just like me, sometimes I don't know what's happening. And then he starts going like this to his body, and then he's like, why do I have blood? Why do I have blood on my body? And it's like a bit puzzling, because it's like, why do you have blood on your body? So we go take a closer look to see if, was he stabbed? What happened, right? Until this guy that I was with was like, oh my goodness, go check on Girly. And this is how I know that this was not the first time this was happening. I literally ran into the house. I remember this. So I ran into the house, went into one of the bedrooms, and found Girly on the floor, bleeding and crying, and it's just something that you do not forget. And I remember thinking, you've seen movies and you've seen sort of like these scenes, but there's nothing like actually experiencing it. So I go and I grab her and I'm like, where did he hurt you? And she couldn't really explain. She was crying. Now I'm the kind of person, if you're crying, I'm gonna cry. I'm not very good in those kinds of situations. And I'm trying not to cry. I'm just trying to comfort her at that time. And Mugai then comes storming in and he's like, you are not going to help her. I want her to die. And he had given her a pretty bad beating. So fortunately, this guy, like I said, was quite a big guy. So fortunately, he was able to now stop Mugai from entering the bedroom. But he was shouting instructions at me very specifically. You are not to help her. Leave her there because I'm going to come back and finish her off. And then he actually at some point went to the kitchen and he said he was going to get a knife. Now at this point in time, I myself am scared for my life. I was so scared. I've never been in such a position. And the big guy says, you know what, I think you need to just change rooms because I don't know how much I can block him. He's going to eventually overpower me. So because the room we were in didn't have a key, it didn't the door didn't lock. So we actually changed rooms and I take her to the other bedroom that at least had a key. So we lock ourselves in there and there's so much commotion. Now the people from outside are in the house. There was so much commotion and he was like, I am going to kill each and every person in this house because you guys don't understand. And obviously he starts hurling insults at her and accusing her of all sorts of things. And I remember sitting in the bedroom, and this is the bedroom that actually I was using at the time, well, for the duration of my visit. And I remember taking my face cloth, and if you know me, I'm very particular with my stuff, but I took my face cloth and I actually started like just wiping the spots where she was bleeding, to try and see, where it was like deep cuts. And I remember just crying as I did that for her. And I'm just going to try not to get emotional. It was such a scary time. So I was scared for both of us, but I was more scared for her, and I felt so sorry for her. I really, really did. And I couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like I was in this movie, and eventually they managed to just sort of contain him. And I don't know what happened. It's all just kind of a blur, but he didn't get inside the bedroom. And eventually we got somebody who said, you know what, let's take you. So I don't know what the conversation was. I had assumed that they're taking us to a hospital or at least to the police station to get this girl some help, and so me and her, I didn't ask any questions. So I just carried her and me and her went to the car and we didn't ask any questions. And that's the thing, when you're assuming that people will help, or when you're assuming that something's going to happen, and we get into the car, and in my mind I'm just running through, what am I going to say to the police, and I'm just thinking, oh, she's going to be fine though, we're taking her to the hospital. I don't know which one I thought we were going to first, but I thought it was one of the two that we were going to, but actually we were not. So they drove and drove, and they were like, so it was my friend and this person that was driving, and they were like, it's so late, we can't see where she stays. So that's when I realized, oh, these people are taking her back to her house. Which, I was like, aren't we going to go to the police? And they're like, no, why would we do that? What are we going to say? But I could tell the guy who was driving, I could tell he also sort of wanted to do something, because I think he also wasn't too familiar with this toxic relationship as it would turn out. So my friend was, so she was like, no, we're just taking her home, she'll be fine, all right? But I was so traumatized, and we eventually took her home to where she stayed with her grandmother, and we dropped her off there. And I just remember being so angry on her behalf, and I felt so betrayed on her behalf. And it was something that I felt like, even the following day, I remember pacing around the house wondering, are we gonna go to the police at some point? Are we gonna report this? Because it just really felt, as much as there was a lot of other things that had happened, this particular incident, I felt that we need to tell somebody about it. We need the police to get involved. What if her life is in danger? And that's what was going through my mind. But to my disappointment, later that afternoon, more guy and girly came by. So they came by, and I remember, I was very eager to see girly, and just, that whole thing. I don't know, when you've been through a traumatic experience with somebody, you kind of just like want to hold them and say, are you okay? So, but as I was approaching her, I could tell how she turned away from me. I could tell that something was off. Something was not right. And so, I kind of sort of stopped in my tracks, and then, sort of started listening to the conversation that was happening, which was Mugai telling us how he and Girly went to the mall, and he bought her new sneakers, and they had such an awesome day. And that's when I realized why she had turned away from me, because I think she was embarrassed, because this is literally a few hours after he had given her such a horrible beating. She still had bruises. She actually didn't like have a black eye, but she had bruises on her face. And I think without saying it to her, when she saw me, she knew that this was wrong. But I feel like there was a communication between me and her in our silence, and us not talking but just looking at each other. There was a part of me that said, why did you go back to him? Why did you sort of, I don't know whether to say forgive him, but why? And in response, I felt like she probably said to me, you wouldn't understand. And that's the thing, I didn't understand. That's why I'm saying, even it's only now that I sort of understand, given the circumstances, when I analyze the situation from a mature point of view, and just from an understanding of the different upbringings that we had. Of course, it didn't make sense to me. But to her, this was somebody that was a provider. To her, this was, somebody she couldn't leave, no matter how badly he hurt her. She was not going to leave. And, him boasting about how he got her the sneakers and stuff, at the time I just felt like it didn't make sense, like it was inappropriate. But once again, when I look at it now, I realize that it was his way of sort of atoning for what he had done, because he was very boastful. He was like, like, and mentioned the price. I think it was like over 1,000 rands, and he was just very, like very proud of himself. And I just remember, in that moment, and once again, it was me just sort of not wanting to go against the crowd, because everybody was fine with it. Everybody was okay with it. Nobody saw anything wrong with it, and nobody even mentioned what had happened, and yeah, and that's how I witnessed violence at that level, very close to me. And you know, I could have potentially myself gotten hurt. Thank God I didn't, but it was just an experience that I'll never forget. To actually have also been part of the aftermath, where nobody discussed it, where nobody said anything, I didn't say anything, is just something that always also stuck with me, you know, to say I didn't say anything. I could have told my friend's mom, you know, the following day. I remember actually when my friend and I came back from dropping her off, we actually cleaned that room where she was beaten up. So with the blood and everything, we cleaned the room, and I think we took whatever items had blood on them and we washed them the following day, you know, so as to clean the evidence. So we cleaned the scene of the crime in essence. And it's just it's something that it's so common. It happens quite a lot, and I don't know how people sort of get over it. I don't know how people watch these things happen, but I can't point fingers at them because I once watched these things happen, and I had no way of doing anything. I do believe though that had I been close to home, I would have told somebody. I would have maybe told my parents about what had happened. But because I was nowhere close to anyone that I could trust with this information, I didn't disclose this to anyone. And my friend and I don't remember us actually even discussing it, you know. And like I said, a lot happened, and it was a horrific experience. And I wish it hadn't happened, and I do wonder what you know became of Girly and Mugai. I can't imagine any good things. Like I can't play a scenario in my mind that is good. So that's a little scary, but yeah, that was how I first witnessed a domestic violence incident in my life. And I wish that was the only one, but there's another one. I'll do a different video about that one. I just wanted to close this video by maybe asking a few questions with regards to what stories you might have. How have you witnessed these kinds of scenarios? Have you been in any kind of incident like that, and how was it for you? How did you deal with it? How did you handle it? Did you report it? What happened in the story that you have? Because I'm sure a lot of us, with the way the stats are looking, a lot of us have witnessed this. And what have we done about it? What did we do? And it's not to point blame, but perhaps you might just want to speak about it. Perhaps you might just want to speak about how you witnessed it from a neighbor and things like that. So I just wanted to probe at what advice would you have for somebody who's young, who's witnessing this, and have you even thought about young people witnessing this? Because I think most times we think about mature adults or just people who are of age going through something like this, but the story will show you that it happens even in young, very young adults, and it's more difficult to know what to do when you're a young adult. So what advice would you have for a young person such as myself in that story as to how do you deal with it? I know I should have probably, as I said, mentioned it to somebody. I should have reported it to an adult person who might have known what to do, but I just want to know what your thoughts and view are on that particular issue. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week. Love and light to you all.